Is fill in the blank, but it's going to be fun.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. I thought what was really neat tonight was...
That's not a question.
I know. I was going to ask about your family, and you had a limousine to bring you, but your mom and dad dropped you off.
Yeah, my mom and dad came up from the Fort Myers area.
And... yeah.
Like to ask you to leave? You know, I always try to schedule gigs in Florida so I could visit them because they're in their 80s and it's tough for them to get around. And so I'll do like Orlando. They'll come out and see me there. I'll do Tampa or Sarasota or Marco Island.
And do you have brothers or sisters?
I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Yeah, 2 older and 2 younger.
What do they do? Do they do?
What do they do?
Yep.
Well, one was a cop in Atlanta, and now he's a PI. And my sister is HR, Human Resources, in California for USC. And then I have another brother, my younger brother, does documentaries and shoots local commercials in Fort Myers and in Atlanta. And then I have a younger sister in Fort Myers that's an artist.
Yeah.
Good question.
Thank you. And when you were growing up, was there anybody that influenced you in your family that was in entertainment at all?
Well, my father was Bob Hope.
Really?
Yeah. So I watched him a lot and learned a lot from him. No, nobody was in the entertainment business. In fact, to this day, I still feel like a George Plimpton being around other people. Like when I was on Saturday Night Live, I thought I have no right being here because I'm not one of these people. You know, nobody in my family is. You know, I'm just comic.
When you got a degree in marketing, got out of college, and did you go right into stand-up comedy as something to do out of college?
No, in my senior year of college, I went to a small business school in Connecticut. Right. In my senior year, I worked in a helicopter factory, and I went to school at nights. And I saved up enough money to pay off my loan, my school loan, and then to go to Europe for a month and a half. And then I was going to go out to California to get into stand-up. That was my plan. I was working at this factory, and the foreman said to me, he says, "What's a young guy like you doing working in a place like this?" Because, you know, I had the mask on, I'm sanding blades and stuff. And I took the mask off. I said, "Oh, no, I'm just doing this to pay off my college loan and travel a little bit in Europe." And he smiled. He goes, "Yeah, I said that 20 years ago, too." And that really was the hammer that fell. And I thought, okay, I'm going to show him.
Well, but what was the point where stand-up comedy came as something you go, that's what I want to do?
Well, I used to memorize the jokes in the back of the Parade magazine. It was a section of the magazine that said my favorite jokes, and there's different comics. And I would memorize those, and I'd go to local parties, you know, in my neighborhood, just, you know, parties, and I'd stand around and I'd tell my friends those jokes, but made them like they were my own. You know, like there was one joke I remember, it said, I still remember this joke 30 years later. The guy goes, I made it my own. I said, you know, hey, did you guys hear about this guy who robbed a fire truck? And they said, "Are you serious?" I said, yeah. And then he was arrested 2 hours later by some guy who robbed a cop car. It's crazy. It's crazy. But eventually my friend said, you should go into New York and do stand-up, you know, check out those clubs. So I went into New York because Connecticut was only about an hour and a half away.
Right.
And I went to a club called the Catch a Rising Star.
Right.
And this was like a typical New York club. It was jam-packed with people, you know, New Yorkers smoking. You could smoke back then in the clubs. And the comics were smoking, and everybody's like, the comics are, you know, really brash, you know, "Hey, motherfucker, what's going on?" You know. And I grew up in my house, nobody swore, you know. So I thought, oh my God, this is scary, you know. I'm going to go out to California and do stand-up. So after I got back from Europe, I waited for my friend to graduate, and we drove out there, and we ended up in San Diego, and I got a lot of jobs for Manpower, which is a temporary help agency where they pay you minimum wage and the crappiest jobs in the world. And I worked as a department store Santa Claus in San Diego for 2 months.
No way.
Yeah. And my friend had the same job in a different department store. And it was depressing because, you know, every winter I was home with my family usually, you know, winters. And now I'm walking through a hot parking lot in San Diego with a Santa Claus outfit on, and it was a cheap outfit too. I was 23 or 24, and it was just, I didn't even look like Santa Claus, you know. But the kids didn't know. They were, you know, they're like 7. They're from Tijuana, and they're all dirty, and they're sitting on, I swear to God, they were peeing on my lap. They were so scared. I don't know if they were peeing or I was peeing, but somebody was scared. And I'm glad Jack Nicholson didn't sit on my lap. But But they, I learned a lot about parents and their kids then because, the kid would sit on my lap and the parents would be yelling from the sidelines, "Tell him what you want, Jimmy, tell him what you want." And they wouldn't let the kids get a chance to talk, But, so that was one of the jobs I had.
Now, so when you started doing stand-up comedy, you were 25, 26 years old?
I was 24.
24. So it took you about 10 years, I think is about right, to get to The Tonight Show, correct?
About 6 years.
6 years. That's fast.
All right, 7.
That's still fast. That's very fast, I think.
Well, the thing with The Tonight Show was the guy used to come to the clubs, the talent coordinator, and it terrified everybody.
Right.
His name was Jim McCurdy.
McCurdy, yeah.
And he would come into the clubs, and comics would either cancel their set because they didn't want him to see him, or people would try to get on.
Right.
And I arranged a couple of auditions for him, and I wasn't quite ready, and I wouldn't pass. And then I auditioned for one other show he was casting, and it was for a Mike Nesmith show, who used to be with the Monkees.
Yes.
And he called me the next day, and he says, "I have good news and bad news. The good news is, or the bad news is, you didn't get the Mike Nesmith show. But the good news is, I'd love for you to do the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson." And as a comic, that's like passing your bar exam to get on the Tonight Show back then. And 3 or 4 days later, I was going to go on. And from that minute he told me I'm going on, I went into a whole that 5-minute set over and over in my head. Like, we could be talking now, you could be asking me something, I'd be nodding, but I'd be thinking about my act in my head. And it got to that point where, I'm behind the curtains now, ready to go out. And Johnny Carson's sitting over there with Ed McMahon, and the band's playing, and I know they're going to introduce me. I'm going over my act in my head, and the curtain opens up, and the audience applauds, and he introduced me. And as I'm walking out to the microphone, I completely forgot my act. And I got out to the spot, and by the time they stopped applauding, I remembered it. And it just took off, and it was great, and it was my dream. And I got a panel after that. He called me over, which is a real...
On the first time?
Yeah. And I bumped the...
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's for me...
I mean, how often does that happen to any comic?
I know.
Almost never.
But for me, that was the highlight of my career, more so than Saturday Night Live or Weeds or any of that stuff. Because, I'm a comic. Comic is what I really like doing. But I bumped the actress that was on after me because I got panel, and I ended up dating her for like 6 months after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. Shirley MacLaine.
Oh, very nice. Wow. What number is she? Now, there's a ton of books out there now about visualizing your success, like The Secret started it and that sort of thing. You see yourself already there. Did you see a plan? I mean, did you see yourself, Carson, Saturday Night Live? Did you visualize, or is it just circumstances put you in the right place?
Well, it's a combination. It's luck. A lot of it's luck. There's a lot of really funny people out there that just haven't made it, like people in the Groundlings in Second City. But they should have been on Saturday Night Live before me, But I just happened to, pay the right amount of money to get on. But I did visualize, but I gave myself 2 years. If I didn't see any progress, I was going to go back to Connecticut.
And what would you do? I mean,
I would probably get into marketing.
And so you got on Saturday Night Live, and the first few years you were married within 2 or 3 years after you got on the show. But that first few years, was that a rock star life like you would think it would be?
No, because none of us thought the show would last. Because the year before we came on, they had Robert Downey Jr. on there and Anthony Michael Hall and a couple other people. But the show was at the lowest ratings ever, and they were about to pull the plug. And then we came in that year, and we were living out of our suitcase every day. We didn't know if the show was going to last. And then kept it another week, and so you never really kind of let your guard down. And but you mean girl-wise?
Well, yeah, in other words, to all of us, we're thinking you're on Saturday Night Live. I mean, you're in New York, you're young, you're on Saturday Night Live. I mean, it's like you're out and everything's in your lap.
But you are at Saturday Night Live. There's no time for anything else. It's like boot camp. You're there like all week. And then after the show and after the after party, you're exhausted. And you sleep most of Sunday. And then next thing you know, you're back in Lauren Michaels' office on Monday pitching to the next host ideas that you'll never do. I had one pitch. After a couple of years of being there, I was there for 9 seasons, so I kind of learned the ropes. It's like a guy being in prison for a long time, I knew what to do when the host came in, and they go around the room in Lawrence Michaels' office with the cast, and everybody's crowded in there, and you pitch an idea to the host, and if it doesn't get a good reaction there, you know, it takes all the wind out of your sail, and you don't write it, and it could be a good idea. So I had the same pitch every week. I would tell the host, and I'd be very enthusiastic with it. I'd say, okay, here's my idea, John Malkovich. I said, okay, there's a runaway truck ramp. And there's all these truckers, their brakes fail, and they go into the runaway truck ramp. You know, it's made out of gravel and goes down the hill. And at the end of the runaway truck ramp, there's a bar. And it's all these truck drivers that come in and talk to you about their truck. And that's exactly what he would do. And I'd say, good, I'm not going to write that. I'm not going to pitch that again next week, and I'll never write that.
You've achieved about everything a performance artist could hope to achieve. I mean, I think, you know, but it is to the.
I can think of a lot of stuff I haven't achieved.
Well, okay, that was my question. Is there something as a performer that you really want to do that you haven't done yet?
No.
No. Okay, so.
Yeah. I like to have my own series.
Okay.
I'd like to be Mary Louise Parker. No, I'd like to do, like, you know, I'm creating my own pilot right now, a sitcom, single camera, half hour. And it's kind of based on this book that I wrote, Yes, You're Pregnant, But What About Me? And, but it's called Then I'll Be Happy.
All right.
Because people are always trying to get to that next level, thinking they'll be happy. And then when they get there, they're not, and they want something else. So it's kind of based on that.
And, well, I guess at this point, I'd like to open it up to the audience if you have any questions.
Between 1 and 20?
Other than a number question? Yes, over here. You can bring the house lights up a little bit if you want. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You tell your aristocrats.
The Aristocrats
joke.
is a DVD or a CD that these guys put together. It's telling, they got a bunch of comics that tell this joke about the Aristocrats, which I've never heard before in my life.
Yeah, I hadn't either.
And I really didn't get the concept of it. And I told the joke, and I never heard the final edition of it. I never heard how it went or anything. I didn't even get the joke. So I wasn't really a big fan of that project.
Another question? Yes. Where do you live in
Connecticut? I live in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It belongs in New Jersey. It's a hellhole. It's a port. There's you know, there's mafia was there, and a lot of gangs. And then you worked at Sikorsky? I worked at Sikorsky Aircraft. Yeah.
Another question? Anything back there? Yes? Go ahead.
Of all the cast members of SNL when you were working there, who's your favorite one?
Favorite cast member?
Boy, there were so many. I had fun with Adam Sandler, Dana Carvey. I dated Jan Hooks for 2 years. Cuckoo. No, she was nice. Jan Hooks was probably one of the most talented sketch comedic actresses I know. The Weekend Update was offered to me after Dennis Miller left. And Lorne Michaels always thought I would be good in that spot. And that's a tough position because people get used to, it's like an incumbent president. They're used to that president. And then when somebody else comes in, you know, if they're not a fan, it takes a while to win them over.
Right.
And nobody wanted to write for Weekend Update because it wasn't a glorifying job for a writer. Nobody on Monday talked about a funny Clinton joke or Bush joke. They were talking about the catchphrases or some character. So they tried to entice the writers to come up on Saturday morning. And they would get all the newspapers, and they would cater a breakfast. They would have, you know, people cooking omelets and stuff for the writers, and they'd have AP photos because there was no internet at the time or Google. And the only people that would come up would be Al Franken and Tom Davis, who would come up and read the paper and have breakfast, and they wouldn't write jokes. And some of the new writers who were just, you know, felt like they had to come up.
Anything, yeah.
So I had to write a lot of my own jokes and read the paper, and then I would also pay writers on the side to fax me in jokes, $50 a joke.
Wow. Yes.
Who were some of your comedic influences growing up?
I loved Steve Martin. I loved Andy Kaufman and Albert Brooks. And I got to meet all three of them and only slept with one of them.
Albert
Brooks.
Yeah.
No, I got to know Steve Martin really well because I did a small part in Roxanne, his movie Roxanne.
Right.
back in 1986, and then I become friends with him. And to this day, we play the banjo together.
Oh, wow.
We did a version of the Weeds theme song, which will be on this year, with both of us playing the banjo.
And a buddy of mine was in the first show who's good friends with some of the guys in the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and had mentioned the banjo player, and you are friends.
Yeah, John McCune.
And is that who you learned?
No, I didn't learn from him, but him and Steve Martin grew up together, and they learned how to play together.
Right.
But Steve I got to know and became friends with, and I remember one time I was in the Caribbean at this island that everybody from Saturday Night Live used to go to, Lorne Michaels, and Steve Martin, and I was out there because Lorne said, you should come out to this island. So I was body surfing with Steve Martin for like 2 days, and then we're on the same flight back, and then we land at JFK, and we're standing on the sidewalk. I'm waiting for my taxi, he's waiting for his limo. And he kind of turned to me, he said, just because we hung out for a few days doesn't mean we're friends. In that Steve Martin way, And I didn't see him for like a year after that.
Was that island St. Bart's?
It was.
Yes. And another question? Yes, there? Yes, you.
I got started watching you on SNL, and Weeds was my favorite. If you had to pick a season of Weeds, what would be your favorite and why?
This season. Because I get to feel somebody up.
All right.
And I get a lap dance.
One of the regulars, or just somebody who's in and out?
I can't say.
Oh,
I can't say.
All right. Yes.
Ted Halverson was a character from Still Standing. I never remember the characters' names that I play. But yeah, that was fun doing that. That was a good show. Still Standing with Jamie something. Hertz. Jamie Hertz. Felt her up too. Kidding.
We're going to take a couple of more and then we'll wrap it up. Yes.
Chris Farley, I remember the first day I saw him. I didn't know anything about him. He came off the elevator at Studio 8H, where we shoot Saturday Night Live. He came with his parents and a brother, or his brothers, and he got off the elevator, and he was such a wide-eyed kind of like, hey, Mr. Nealon, and he was always very self-effacing and not a lot of confidence, always second-guessing and kind of out of control, like really got into a lot of trouble, with misconduct and stuff, and I can't go into details. And then he just kind of really got out of control. He was a big fan of John Belushi's, and he wanted to emulate John Belushi. And I told him one day, when he first started, he started doing drugs, I said, John, what's his name, Chris? I said, Chris, you really got to, I would always say, take it down a notch, And I remember sometimes he'd be like, raising his voice and stuff, and he'd catch eye contact with me, and he'd go, what, take it down a notch? I said, yeah. But I said, John Belushi died, yeah. I said, I forget how the conversation went, but he wanted to be so much like John Belushi, and he was suggesting that John did drugs, so why shouldn't he do drugs? And because John was very funny. And I said, yeah, but John would have been a lot funnier if he didn't do drugs, And he goes, oh, okay, but he kept doing drugs. And then he died at the same age as John Belushi.
Right. Okay.
That we kind of saw coming. The Phil Hartman thing we didn't see coming.
Yes.
Very funny story about your wife. What do you guys do now on your anniversaries?
What was the funny story? Oh, right. On our anniversaries? I got to work on that. We go out to dinner, whatever, I get her something I can't afford.
What will Father's Day be like for you?
Hopefully I can go golfing and go see a movie and do things I used to do when I was single.
That's great. And you have a Showtime special that is coming out.
Showtime special is coming out this summer. It's called Whelmed, but Not Overly.
Ah.
And
did the audience this tonight get to see some things that
Yes.
are... Yes.
And they saw some things from my last special and some things from my Johnny Carson show.
Oh, all right. Very
And some
nice.
things from 5th grade.
Oh, okay.
And also some stuff from Parade magazine.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Les. Thank you,
Appreciate it.
everybody.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you.